here from the Next Issue podcast. Today we are doing, we're going back and doing some more letter pages, which means I contact somebody that I want to talk to about comics and stuff, and I have them on the show. Now, this is the first time we do one on the YouTube channel, um, but I'm very excited. So let me bring on my guests, and I'll let them tell you more about who they are. There we go. Hello, hi,
Hi.
Ambrosha. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Do you want to tell people on my channel who you are?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ambrosia. People typically know me from TikTok as Comics and Cupcakes, and I talk about comic books. And I wanted to bake more, but life has been a little busy. And yeah.
Well, great. Thanks for coming on. TikTok was how I kind of I stumbled into your TikTok and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like somebody's just talking about comics here. Um,
Yeah,
it's
and that's what I love. It's just been so cool to have conversations and meet fun people like you who are also
yeah,
into comic books so we could have those neat discussions.
yeah. I love the Wednesdays when you go through all the books, and then on Sundays bringing us those fun facts, trips to the comic shop, like all that stuff that I feel like it makes comics more accessible to a whole bunch of people that maybe didn't know they that I don't know. Sometimes I feel getting into comics can be a little daunting because like where do you even start, right?
Yep, and that was my whole goal because there's so many people on TikTok now that do like origin stories
Mhm.
and like superheroes in the past. But one of my biggest goals was to bring people into comic books
Yep.
and where to start. And a lot of people didn't even know that comic book stores like still exist and
Yeah.
that comics are still being published.
Yeah. No, for sure. We're pretty lucky here in Dallas because we have a plethora of comic book stores. I think over the since we had the holiday and this whole week, I was all over town. Like I've probably gone to six of our eight, like six different comic shops just in the past week
You have it.
because
Whoa.
yeah, we have a lot of comic stores in like the Dallas Fort Worth area. So we're pretty lucky that, and they're all very different too. Like some of them will have like huge back issue sections, and then some of them will be more like, what do you call it? There's just like this is all the new stuff we have. Some of them have games and stuff combined, so it's kind of a big mix.
Yeah, and that's what we have out here. I guess we also have like one of the biggest comic book stores in the US, I believe. Um, or I could be wrong, but it's
No, it's is it Mile High?
yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my. It's on my bucket list of like places to go visit because I want to just spend a whole day looking through the store.
And you can spend the whole day because it is just so big and they just have so many cuz like they have like um everything down to like just graphic novels and like
Hmm.
merchandise and action figures and comic books and back issues and yeah, they have so much. And so we have a lot of comic book stores like within like maybe like 5 within like a 45-mile radius from me.
Okay.
But my closest one is about like 20 minutes away. But I know that like out in Austin, Texas, there's a ton too. And I know Donny Cates live out in Austin. And so like
Yeah.
I heard that he like during the pandemic, he like went out and covered everyone's pool lists or like their hold boxes at like a couple comic book stores. So like I love hearing stuff like that and knowing that there are so many comic book stores like in other areas.
Hmm. Yeah, and well, we're pretty big fans of Donny Cates in this podcast because he's a local boy. He grew up here in Dallas, in the Dallas area, and now he lives in Texas. Which I mean, he still lives in Texas, which is cool. But he's also writing so many cool projects.
I love Donny Cates. He is like one of my favorites right now. Everything he writes, I haven't read anything that's like bad from him or that I haven't enjoyed.
Yeah, there's a few creators that I have two different pull lists at two shops because one of them has more Marvel DC stuff, one of them has more indie stuff. So like they have kind of like standing orders of like if somebody puts out a book, if this creator puts out a book, you put it on my pull list no matter like no matter what's going on. And Donny Cates is one of those people.
Yeah, I've been so excited for everything that he's come out with, and I'm excited for him to work on Immortal Hulk because that has been such a good series.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be such a different from what Al Ewing's doing with the horror stuff, because I don't know that Donny Cates is a horror guy.
uh,
Um,
yeah. Have you read Baby Teeth?
so I'm way behind because I'm a bad comic reader, but yes, I have read some Baby Teeth. Um,
I mean, being pregnant with the Antichrist is pretty
yeah,
intense.
yeah, for sure.
I
Um,
think he's gonna do really well with the horror aspect of it.
yeah. Now you also have a podcast. Do you want to tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yes. So I host comic book history lessons. And right now, episode 7 will be out on Wednesday. And it goes back to wanting to teach people about comic books. Because that's, I asked on TikTok, like, why the MCU is bigger, or like why the cinematic universe is bigger than the comic book universe.
Mhm.
And so many people said like that they were intimidated and they didn't know where to start. And
Yep.
so I wanted to create a podcast that uh broke down characters and broke down even like the writers, because I feel like the writers and the artists don't get enough credit either for their work.
Yep.
And so I wanted just to create a podcast where it was welcoming and where you could learn about comic books and feel more um, not as intimidated.
Yeah. No, it's very inclusive. I've listened to. I think I'm pretty caught up. I think I haven't heard the Flash, which is
I think
this is
that's,
Golden Age Flash, which is
yeah.
I think the one that's out the latest. But I really enjoyed not only getting to know, like, your story and kind of how you got into this podcast and the comics and stuff, which we'll get more into details in a minute. But you're just kind of going through the actual history in order of, like, the Golden Age. There was so much more than just like, even before Stanley and Jack Kirby started doing all their stuff. Um,
Yeah, I haven't even talked about Jack Kirby or Stan Lee yet. Like,
yeah.
we're still like in the baby
Mhm.
golden ages of it, because I don't know. In order to fully appreciate comics, I think you have to. Well, no, that's not true. You don't have to know from the beginning, but I think people would feel more comfortable if they knew the beginning of it all, because of, I hate saying this, but because of the gatekeepers
Yep.
and like them like just constantly like testing you. Like, I saw on TikTok the other day, like this girl was talking about how she was wearing her red hood.
Yeah.
Did you see that
Sure.
one?
I think I've seen similar. I mean, maybe I've seen just memes that are very similar to what you're gonna talk about. But yeah, go ahead.
Like, she works at a comic book store and she was wearing a red hood hoodie. And someone was like, "Oh, I like your Batman Arkham Knight
Oh
hoodie." And
yeah, I did see that
she was
one.
like, "No, actually it's Red Hood." And like he
Right.
just kept like, no, you're wrong." And so um I don't know. I know for myself, I feel like I constantly have to be educated um to I kind of defend myself.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons I like to have all kinds of people on the show, because I think to be a comic books fan, you just want to, like, even if you've never read a comic, if you like comic book art, if you like just found the comic, if you only collect them and don't even read them, like, there's so many, like, there's no, like, threshold to be like a comic book fan of,
No.
right?
And I wish like other people saw that. Because like they're like, even when it comes to like independent books, like they're not just like superhero books. There's
Right.
literally everything.
Yeah.
But it's also intimidating going into the comic book stores. Um, like I've talked to people who uh they've wanted, like parents who want to take their kids into the comic book stores, but they have like no idea where to go.
Hmm.
Sometimes comic book stores like aren't necessarily the friendliest at like,
Yeah.
"Hi, what can I help you with? What are you interested in?" So that's something that I would like to help bridge. And so like that's why when I cover like things that are coming out, you could go to the comic book store and be like, "Hey, I heard this comic book was good."
Yep. Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think I had a pretty good luck finding a good store when I started getting into comics, which was pretty late. It was after college. Like, I needed something extra to do.
Yeah.
So it's not like it feels like I've been reading comics my whole life, but I really haven't. It's only been a little part of it, but it's such a big part of my life now.
No, and
Yeah.
I totally agree because I started reading comic books in high school, but I only read what I could find, like what
Mhm.
was at the library or like things online. I didn't get into like collecting comic books and like looking at like trade backs and going and reading
Yeah.
everything not until I was in college.
Yeah.
Yeah, because yeah, same. So there are stories of like people who like have been reading comics since they were like 3, and that wasn't me, but you kind of just dive in and then you have a passion for it and then you just go with it. And so
Yeah.
I think
No.
that's like another thing. Like you don't have to be reading comics your whole life to like comic books, and that's what
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been really cool with like everything going out when like with Loki and with the cinematic universe that more people are wanting to know like the origin stories and like the
Right.
backstories of it. And so they have been reading comics more.
Right. Because they want to also like. I feel like these shows and movies have been pretty good about like if you've never read a comic, you still get a really cool story. But if you have read comics, you get a little bit like you get the Easter eggs and the theories and all that stuff, and like a lot of people just kind of want to be part of that. So they're like, well, how do I start learning about like all these little Easter eggs that are being hidden, or who the next villain might be, or they just announced like like they cast somebody as this person. Well, I don't know who that is, but like multiple people know that who that is already, and at least in the comics. So that's I don't know. I feel like it really adds levels to the like enjoyment of the. It's not just enjoying the movie because now you're just kind of enjoying the characters and the history, and it's so rich in a lot of these characters because they've been around for so long.
Yeah. No, and that's yeah, that's what's been so much fun. And I feel like though, sorry, this will be my last thing because I feel like I'll probably go off on a tangent. But like I feel
We
like
love tangents here.
the cinematic universe is like doing an injustice when it comes to comics because I feel like that's such a good like promotion that they could be doing
Mhm.
like at the comic book stores or like even like it'd be so cool if they sold comic books at the movie theaters now
Yeah,
like about like hey check out these Black Widow comic books or like check out like the Avengers like storylines. If you liked this storyline you should see where it came from or like bits and pieces came from this. I don't know.
I would love if like in the middle of a movie you get like a little editor's note like this character first appeared in this comic. Like it's like
Yeah.
just stuff like even if it's not in the theatrical release, like maybe while they're on Disney Plus, they can add stuff to it like that to make it
Or
more interactive.
do you like in comic books there'll be like the editor notes
Yeah, yeah,
uh like see issue blah 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 blah.
hmm
No, that would be so cool if they had that.
yeah. They could make it a lot more interactive, and then kind of like here's where you can buy stuff and visit your shops or like I they did like they started doing comics that are kind of tied to the movies for a little bit, and they've always tried. I don't know how successful those are. Because sometimes it feels like they're just recapping part of the movie or like the previous movie, and I'm like, no, if you're gonna give us something, just like do like an actual story, because that way we'll really want to read it. Uh,
Right.
so I gotta say, my favorite episode of your podcast is the Rise of the Dark Knight, for multiple reasons. Because I love Batman, and not a lot of people shed light on the Bill Finger's work, and you really focused on that. It's been brought to the forefront more recently, um, but not a lot of people know who Bill Finger. Up until a few years ago, they may not even know who he was.
Well, first, thank you so much for listening to my podcast. And no, thank you so much. Yeah, like that whole history makes me so sad because I love Batman.
Hmm.
And knowing how, like, it was actually created by 2 people and Bob Kane got so much credit for it, it
Hmm.
just breaks my heart. And that's why I really try to talk about the writers and the artists.
Hmm.
With comic books because I really do feel like they get like the short end of the stick. Like so many of their stories are now being in like the cinematic world and
Yeah,
sometimes I feel like they're not getting the recognition that they deserve for some of like the coolest things that we have out there.
yeah. No, I completely agree. I think I mean, there's creators that the comic industry doesn't have a retirement plan, so they may not even have like, they struggle now that they're in that age, and when now their characters are making like all these like giant sacks of money bringing it into everyone else. So
Yeah, which is so absurd. Like they're getting so much money when the creators, like Bill Finger, died with like nothing.
Yeah.
Um, and like what sucks is that like Bob Kane didn't even recognize him until after he passed. So he didn't get any recognition or any money of it. And that's like how many other comic book writers and artists are in the same boat of not getting everything that they deserve.
Yep. You did mention on your episode to watch the Batman and Bill documentary on Hulu, which I had watched before listening to your episode. So yeah, it's just it's heartbreaking. Um, but you also learn a lot about not just how like everything that is Batman and how much history there is to this just one character. So if you like that, then you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, and that's what I loved so much about that documentary. I didn't even know who told. Someone told me about it, and that's when I researched it because yeah, it was so eye opening to how much goes into how much history is just in one character. And then
Mhm.
also, have you seen Behind the Mask on Disney Plus?
Not that one. I think that one has like a picture of like the Hulk and Greg Pak in the cover.
I
I
don't know. I
think.
haven't seen it either,
Uh,
but people
okay.
have told me I
Yeah,
should watch it.
I've scrolled by it, but I haven't just because there's so much stuff to watch. But I do love that they're putting stuff like that. I watched some of the Marvel 616, which also had like they some episodes focused on creators.
Oh,
So
that's
that was
cool.
cool. Yeah.
No,
Um.
no, that's really awesome. And that's I haven't seen the Behind the Mask on Disney Plus, but I feel like it's supposed to explore like more of the identities of like the superheroes and everything. So that's on my bucket list to watch. But I love Stanley so much because he's done so much. But
Mhm.
I feel like people just automatically look at Stan Lee and Jack Kirby um when there are so many other
Oh yeah.
people who are involved as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think something that's really important, and I try to when I do my comic reviews, is like if anybody that's on those credits, they're gonna get a shout out and they're gonna get tagged and stuff because they also work like it, it's such a collaborative industry. I don't know how comics get put out every week with so many people working on one thing. Like that's a big machine that can, like yeah, I feel like it's a miracle that we get new comics every Wednesday.
No, most definitely. That's what it was. When I was searching, okay, so I try really hard to not butcher names, and I couldn't figure out how to say the last name of an artist. So when I was looking up the artist's last name, it was your podcast that came up. So I rewatched your video like 5 times so I could like try to say it how you like. I can't even remember the name it was.
I want to maybe Sienkiewicz. Bill Sienkiewicz is a tough one usually. But
Mhm.
thank you for yeah, thanks for checking out the video.
No,
Um,
because especially because you do highlight everyone who's on the cover. I think that's huge. And so yeah, there you go. I specifically remembered like why well, I mean, I watch your podcast anyway, but why I specifically like
yeah,
rewound it so I could learn how to pronounce the names.
well, yeah, I definitely try to because, like I said, all these people are super important to getting these books out. Um, yeah, I just love that you're going through the golden age. Like the golden age, I feel like it gets kind of like lumped into like, yeah, there was Batman, Superman, and maybe Shazam, and then we get a Flash, and then that leads people straight into the Silver Age when there's so much more.
No, there is. And even like I don't know, I'm excited to talk about Captain America and like the whole purpose of his creation and like
Mhm.
during World War II because like comics were looked at as a outlet to things going on in society. Um and even like when they first started like with the Great Depression and everything,
Yeah.
I don't know, I just love the history of it all. And oddly enough, like most of it all took place in like New York, and so a lot of this has nothing to do with anything. I just find it very interesting. But like most of the writers and creators were all like Jewish, and yeah, they all knew each other. I don't know. I just found that so cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense why a lot of Marvel characters are based out of New York, because they were just kind of writing and creating what they know. whereas like all the DC stuff and like it's got these fake names of fake cities, but it's pretty much like Metropolis and Gotham City. They're just two different sides of New York,
Right.
right? They're two different neighborhoods in New York, but it's pretty much the same thing.
No,
Um,
100%. Yeah. So I just find that interesting. So learning where it all came from and started, and hopefully that gets people excited to continue on to like the comic book journey.
yeah. Now I will say also I want to commend you because I think doing a podcast by yourself is pretty daunting. Like,
Oh, I was terrified. And I still am because I actually would have never thought about doing my own podcast. I've been on other people's podcasts,
mhm,
and then a podcasting network reached out to me and asked me if I would want to start a podcast, and so we were talking about ideas and everything, and then we came up with like the comic book history lesson, and then I was like, yeah, who would I do it with? And they were like, I think you should try it on your own. I was no. Um, and I think what makes it so hard is that, for one, I have like 7 to 10 pages of notes, and I'm going through it, and it takes me like 30 minutes. And I was like, what? I don't understand. Versus like when it has like two people, you could like banter back and forth.
yes.
And if there is any awkwardness, you could, I don't, I don't know.
No,
You have
I know they like bounce things off, or like you can kind of rescue each other from whatever hole you're digging. I'm pretty lucky that we have a total of 4 guys on the podcast that we kind of rotate around, like depending on who's available. But I've been pretty lucky. This podcast has gone through so many different iterations of what it is to what it is now. And now our latest thing, just doing stuff on YouTube, because I feel like I don't know, I it helps us. I feel like it helps us connect a little bit more because people can kind of see you and like like they see where I hang out all day, especially in the most recent months. Like I'm just kind of here all the time doing stuff, working or creating content. Um, but yeah, like I said, I saw your TikToks and then you announced your podcast, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then once I hear it, I'm like, oh, this is really cool.
oh, well,
But I
thank
have,
you.
but I have no idea how you're just going like I said, doing it on your own, and it feels like a big hurdle, but I think you're managing really well.
Thanks. Yeah, I still question it. Because yeah, it is by myself, and I never like. I got told that like history is really boring, which it is. And so it's you definitely want to engage, but at the same time, like
Mhm.
I I don't know. So I'm just going with it at this point. I definitely thought about having like a second person, but it's really hard because you want that person just as excited about
Yeah,
comic books as you are, and not saying that like you aren't or like someone else's. But what's hard is that I also have a really, really busy schedule and a
mhm.
really tight schedule. Like I work 2 jobs and volunteer, and I'm kind of all over the place. Uh, and so trying to find someone that also could be consistent with my ongoing schedule was
Yeah.
really hard. So I was like, all right, here we go.
Yeah, well, that's one of the. I think that's one of the charms of your TikTok, that they're all kind of like they're all shot and looks like very like you never know which location you're gonna pop up in.
I'm never in the same place. No,
Right.
sometimes I'm at school. Sometimes I'm in my basement. Sometimes I'm at work. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
in my car. It's literally, and that kind of sums me up. I'm all over.
No, but you're very consistent because there's always snacks and there's always comics and always a good attitude. I think, which is why I think people find you engaging, and they want to follow your content.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Well, let's get into kind of your origin story a little bit, at least when it comes to comics.
Yeah.
How did you get? So you said you read comics in high school, but how did you get into like collecting comics, and what's your story there?
So, I found issue 122 of the Amazing Spider-Man at my local comic book store, or no, at my local library. Like it was just like in their comic book pile, which was like the death of Gwen Stacy, and I instantly fell in love with Peter Parker because I think at that time we both I just connected really well to Peter Parker. He was young and in high school. I was young and in high school.
Hmm.
He had a ton of juggling plates or spinning plates, and I had a ton of spinning plates, and so I instantly just got a connection to him, while also having I had a lot of like my home life at that point wasn't the best, so I looked up to Peter Parker a lot of like, hey, things are rough, but I also could be a superhero. And so I think I really turned to him as an inspiration of
Yeah.
things could be rough, but you also could get through X, Y, and Z. Um, and so I just continued up with Peter Parker. So I mostly read just Spider Man throughout high school. And then that's all I collected was Spider Man. And it wasn't until I got into college when I was reading like Venom and Carnage, and that there were so many like spin-offs, and then
Yeah.
you see how like those spin-offs go into like other spin-offs, and then how like there's a connection to like this character, and so then you just want to learn more, and then you just start reading everything. But in terms of collecting, I my goal one day is to try to have as much of the Amazing Spider-Man comics as I can. I know I will never be able to get issue 1 or 2 or 3,
Mm.
um, or 4 or 5. But so I collect all Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy and anything in the spider realm of things.
Yeah.
And then I collect um, Star Wars, and then everything else is digital for the most part. So I'll have like my pools. So when I do my pools on, sometimes I feel bad because my pools that I pick up aren't all that I have because I read a ton of digital as well, or
Yeah.
I wait for the trade backs. But when it comes to like single issues, I collect all Spider Man, Star Wars, Venom, Carnage, um, all of that realm of things.
Yeah, even though that's only a few characters that can add up to a lot of books.
Oh my gosh, so many. Yeah, and then everything else I just try to get in trade back or digital.
Yeah.
And wait, do you have a specific collection?
No, I'm kind of all over the place, but I think I do focus a lot on Batman and X-Men books, and those are like both of those franchises have like there's so many X-Men books out right now,
Oh
and
my
I've
gosh,
been yeah
it's been so crazy right now.
I've been reading everything X-Men. I mean, since before even the new relaunch of House of X, but after House of X, I've kind of picked up everything X-Men related, and for the most part, I'm really enjoying everything that's going on. And then as well with Batman was one of the first series I started picking up with Scott Snyder and Capullo when they relaunched in 2011. So it's been about 10 years of me collecting comics like pretty regularly. Um, oh, that's wild. I didn't even. Sometimes I don't realize how long it's been.
No, you don't realize it until you look at like your stacks and like your books and
Yeah.
your long and your short cases. And I remember though, like I had to be super specific, like going through college and then being like a first year teacher, my budget was tight. And so
Yeah.
I remember like so many conversation of like maybe I should just like stop buying comics. But
Mhm.
that was like my non-negotiable that like no matter what, I'm
Yeah.
always going to continue with buying comics.
No, same. Yeah. Anytime, even if there's like a rough patch, like I'll never completely stop. Um, but I'll definitely one of the hardest things to do is go to your comic shop and be like, "Can you drop some of these books from my pull?" It feels
Yeah.
kind of like you're breaking up with your books, and it's weird.
No, it is. It is, especially when they have them like stacked ready for you,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
like, actually.
yeah.
But
But
then I also see going weekly isn't as bad. I know I have friends who go like monthly, and like their comic book stacks are like this high, and then they put like
mhm.
half of them back, and I'm like, no, just go weekly. It's fine. It's not. It doesn't make it seem as hard.
Yeah, no, and it's one of the. I mean, especially now that I've been working from home, like one of the highlights on my day is taking a break in the middle of the day, going to pick up my stuff, and it's just like it's relaxing. It's nice. I get to talk to the people at the shop, which was another thing that we kind of lost for a minute there when the comic book shops were closed or just doing curbside stuff. Like like conversation that you'll have about like what's going on this week, what are you reading, or like anything cool. Not being able to kind of look through everything because I love buying variant covers, even if for books that I may not even be reading,
Yeah.
just because of artists that I may appreciate. So yeah, that whole ritual on Wednesdays, it's really fun.
No, and yeah, most definitely. I think that was incredibly hard during the pandemic when comic book stores were closed.
Hmm.
Or when was it Diamond that like they just stopped publishing or like things just got.
Yeah, they stopped distributing stuff, and then the comic books stopped publishing. So like even if there were stuff to just publish, they're not going to distribute it, so nobody's going to send anything out, which has led to all this like a lot of Marvel and DC switching distributors, and there's a big mix up now in the comic industry, which I think it was very much needed. Um,
Oh, why?
oh, just because I feel like getting everything from one place. I don't know. A monopoly is never good for any industry.
Right.
So the fact that Diamond covered like 90% of the books that were going to the shops were kind of at the will of Diamond. Now there's also a lot. I talk to the owners all the time, and there's also like hurdles now with the new distributors because comics may not be their main focus. So or they don't know like comics ship differently than books and trades and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's hurdles and Marvel switching. I think they're in October. They're switching to Penguin House
And
to
yeah,
distribute it.
who's DC switching to? Are they doing Penguin as
They
well?
they are with Lunar now. They were with something called Universal, I think, for a while. But then at the beginning of the year, they switched to Lunar, which has been doing well. I think I actually like getting my DC stuff on Tuesday, even
Oh,
if
do
it's
you?
just like yeah, even if it's just buying digital stuff, because it gives me more time to read. And now that I'm doing the channel stuff, like I can do a DC review on Tuesday, a Marvel review on Wednesday, and then so it breaks up my reading cadence a little bit. So I don't mind the switch. I usually don't pick up anything until Wednesday, anyways, but I will pick up a few digital things, uh, like something I want to review or whatever. I'll pick it up on Tuesdays. So it's nice to have early access, I guess,
Yeah.
to the books.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, so we'll see how this new distributing goes because yeah, like Penguin does mostly books.
Hmm.
So we'll
Yeah, and if it goes well, we shouldn't even feel it. Like the customer overall will not feel any pain points, but um, it's really gonna be all on the comic shops. Like they're kind of taking the brunt of it for the customer. So hopefully it goes well for them.
No, me too. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Um. All right. So now that is there any creators kind of that you're kind of following around, like things that you're like, oh, if this person writes a book, I'm definitely picking it up, no questions asked, or an artist or something like that.
Donny Cates. Like I know we talked about that recently, but
Yeah.
I guess I think it was the last year when I really started to dive into Donny Cates stuff.
Mhm.
Between I think God Country was one of
Oh
like
yeah, yeah,
one of the first things I read, but I didn't read it when it first came out. Which I'm excited about because they're making a movie out of it.
yeah, yeah, and he's very involved too, so that's cool.
No, yeah, so I'm super stoked about that. But right now, as like I'm trying to read like all of his stuff. So, I know we talked about Baby Teeth, and I'm only on volume 2. Because what that was written in 2015, 2017, and then he stopped for a while,
Yeah.
but then they started it back up.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I think it's almost done if I'm not mistaken.
okay,
Every time I go to the shop, I'm like, "Is this the last one?" He's like, "No, not yet." But yeah, I think it'll end at maybe 30 or 32, somewhere around there, and we're pretty close. Um,
yeah.
so then maybe I'll do a binge and finish and catch up.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I've been buying like as soon as I'm done with like one trade back, I'll buy like the next trade
Yeah.
back, and slowly but surely because there's so many things that I want to read. but
Mhm.
my wallet kind of holds me back. So
Well, and that's one cool thing I guess about the comics industry right now too, is that people don't realize I love the fact that I have a library card that allows me to access to that Hoopla digital service,
yeah,
because I can check out a bunch of new stuff. And it's, the comic creators are still they still benefit because libraries do buy the books. So so that's good for them. And also, obviously, the library is a service that we should all use because it's available to everyone. So I always
I
encourage everyone to like check out Hoopla and get a library card.
yes. For us, ours is called what is it called? I have the app on my phone because I'm literally at the library twice a week.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is such like an underrated. Oh, our app is. I think it's the same as Hoop. Is it Hoopla?
Yeah.
But it's called Libby.
Okay.
Uh, and it's through the Anythink library. But yeah, I'm at the library at least twice a week. Well, for one, I tutor kids there.
Okay.
But for two, there's just such an amazing resource that not a ton of people like. I feel like it needs to take it. I don't know. It's free, and they have
Yeah.
so many things there. Like they have like even when it comes to like graphic novel stuff and trade backs, there's a ton.
Yeah. And there's so much. I think they're finally understanding that people like this stuff more because there's so much more stuff now. I remember, going when I was younger, like you had like the usual books like, I don't know, Watchmen and a bunch of Batman stuff and stuff like that. But now you go in and I think they even have manga now, which is great because I love reading manga.